old 1930s photos where they have a Model T that they drive up going to the Sun Road. They're frolicking at the glacier, kind of enjoying themselves. And I'm looking down at it with the photo, and I don't always see it in flight. I'm grabbing the photo of what remains, and I go home and look at the images, and it might be this much of the glacier remaining, but where back in the 30s it was about this much. Looking down, that's where they were hiking right from the road.
The European Environment Agency says that these glaciers have lost half of their mass since 1900, but the acceleration of that loss has gotten worse. Break that down for us. I mean, because it's hard for us to imagine a half of something gone or 5% of something gone. What is someone likely to experience if they went back to a glacier every year and, say, stood at the same spot?
Well, if we want to jump back to 1900, I mean, we can go all the way back about 200 years ago, and you had stories in the Alps and even in Norway where they're concerned that the glacier is coming to destroy the village. It's growing. So the reverse problem. Now we're concerned they're disappearing. Back then they're looking, and now of course in even the Alps you have this glacier, you have a glacier up there and a village here. So they're terrified it's coming. They used to have these sort of religious rituals to sort of try to curse the glacier and to stop from growing and whatnot. They didn't understand it. So there's the one that strikes me the most is in a painting I saw from Grindelwald, which Grindelwald it's a resort town. It's near Interlaken, and so it's very incredibly steep. It's some of the most vertical relief you'll find in the Western world, particularly the populated Western world. It goes up 9,000 feet, practically vertical. And the glacier, now it's quite far up. It's still quite a stunning canyon that comes down, and you can clearly see at the 1860 maxima that the moraine went all the way down almost to the farmland. So that to me was always striking, because you're looking down saying, holy cow, it went all the way down there, and now it's up here. Still striking, by the way, it's still pretty. However, you see this kind of scar mark, which tells you where it was. The painting shows the ice having spilled into what is the Grindelwald village now, which is to us almost fundamentally unfathomable, this idea that you're down at 3,000 feet, you know, this glacier coming from 12 all the way down to 3, spilling to where probably Swiss cows with bells were mooing and eating grass right next to it. That's what life was like for them. And when we look now, that's 80 to 90% loss. The bulk of it is gone. And so my takeaway, I think some people, when there's an alarmist projection, there's a short circuit that goes on in the mind. You kind of hear an alarmist thing and you say, well, that won't happen, or it's so far down. You're going to short circuit. We say, you know, I can't fathom that. What I see tells me that the short circuit's just in our head. I mean, ETH Zurich predicts by 2100 there could only be 2 glaciers in Switzerland, just 2. And I believe it. From what I see, absolutely, that very much can happen.
Wow. So, you know, in Alaska, I've heard, and I've seen reports here that says it's 60 times worse snow loss than in the 19th century. I mean, how do you keep up with a landscape that's changing so fast? Even in, as you're saying, you kind of just went back to try to recapture something and it's already changed.
Well, the only thing you can do is go as fast as possible. That creates the sense of urgency that I don't want a single season lost. And also, I'd like to double the season by including the Southern Hemisphere, which would introduce the January to probably early April timeframe. That's really what drives me, is I do not want to have one single summer where I'm unprepared and I'm unable to catch something.
I mean, you said you have kind of a limited window. How many days does it take to photograph glaciers if, well, there could be snow coming back and winter could be starting in some of these high altitudes?
So it depends on the season. On average, in a high altitude situation, about August 6th, the season opens up. Depends on the year in question. That runs usually fairly safely to about September 7th, and then that is dependent on first snows. If they delay, if first snows are very, very light, and then you get a gap. And then usually around September 23rd to 30th, the season is over. There's a couple variants. So this is what I've lived with this in the US Rockies. That was exceptionally true there, which is doubly hard with the wildfire smoke, fights with it with visibility issues. The Alps was exactly the same. Norway's even a bit later. It pushes later into when the incoming storms in September come. What I understand, though, is Alaska has the option for the glaciers terminating into the ocean are beginning to melt off in early summer. And then the melting goes up to incredible altitudes. And that's the area of my next focus.
So how are you flying? What kind of aircraft? You said you were in a small aircraft?
So it started with it's a Piper PA11, which is called a Cub Special. It's a two-seater from 1949 with a 100 horsepower carbureted engine. My grandfather rebuilt it in the 90s, and that's when I learned how to fly in and got my license in the US in the late 90s. So I started with that one. That's the one I used in Montana and Colorado and Wyoming. That one also was shipped to Europe, and I used that in the Alps. And then I bought another aircraft in late 2021. It's the next model. It's a Piper PA18 Super Cub, again, two-seater. If the average person saw the two side by side, they might see a light pickup and a heavier pickup. They would kind of see the same thing. But what is under the hood matters. The engine power is greater. The speed's a bit greater, double the fuel. There's a number of factors that the older airplane would have taken me a week just to get from Switzerland to Norway. And that's why I got the newer one, is we can't be taking that long just to get there. And the season in Norway reinforced it was a very good purchase. It would have been impossible with the older one.
So in these tiny aircraft, especially ones that were built in the 40s, do you have heaters? I mean, if you're flying at altitude, isn't it cold?
So the older one does not have a viable heater at all. And that does get exceptionally cold at altitude, particularly in the Alps. Usually the glaciers start about 10,000 feet and they go up to 15. So a day I learned in the beginning, you take off and it's 82 Fahrenheit in a t-shirt and you're at 15,000 feet and it's 25 and you have the window open at 90 miles an hour. That's perhaps a heater or some gloves might be useful. The newer one does have heat that works.
So how dangerous is this work that you're doing?
I don't consider it all that dangerous. Depends on the perspective of who's asking the question. From an aviation standpoint, generally mountain flying is considered dangerous. It has a lot to do with, there's just a lot of weather there. So if you took any old part of the atmosphere, 12,000 feet, that's fairly predictable. You insert mountains in there, you're going to get more turbulence, you're going to get more precipitation and clouds and other things. I'm not so much worried about that because I've been doing this in many, many mountain ranges. So I'm used to that. What concerns me is a single engine carbureted aircraft if the engine quits. Almost all aircraft, except for the largest airliners, are gliding when they're on final approach. So their prospect of gliding is not a shocking idea. You have a range that if the engine quits, the plane's going down in some area of the glide ratio. The thought is exactly what it's going down over.
When did you get interested in this?
It started in the late 90s. I was a teenager. I recall the conversation driving with a friend, a rather intellectual teenager. He had mentioned one of the studies was pivotal at the time. It was an update on the projections of the melt of Glacier National Park in Montana. And it predicted the loss of all glaciers by roughly 2030. And I had this visceral reaction. I had to see them before they were gone. Unacceptable. It was, I don't know if it was in American heritage or national parks out west, that how can you have Glacier National Park without glaciers? But I had to see them. I'd never been out west. I'd never been to Montana. I'd never been to a glacier, but that was the first indication that this was coming, even though it took a while to mature.
Yeah. So as you go along documenting this, I mean, you have a day job?
Yes, so I do effectively accounting and finance work, which I do remotely, and that's what pays for all of it. And that can be it can be something of a challenge. It was quite interesting looking at the whole remote office packed up into the car going up to Norway, but that's how we kept it all glued together.
Is this about raising awareness? Is this about your kind of personal quest to see all these beautiful things before they're gone? I mean, what's the kind of driving motivator for what makes you get into a plane and get up somewhere cold and take photographs?
So it of course has a personal component. I mean, no one could do this kind of thing that long without liking it. I do love glaciers. I love looking at them. I don't tire of them, and it's a convenient way to get to them. Yes, that is true. The second thing that drives me is I'm thinking of future generations, centuries down the line, between the natural cycle out of the ice age and the fact we've given it a good old boost with our decisions as a society for the last 100 years. This chance of them coming back comes into the next ice age. We're talking millennium, tens of thousands of years. So this is something a few hundred years from now, as far as the temperate regions are concerned, other than the poles, we're experiencing something that won't exist. And when I think of the work that goes into archaeological digs where they're just scraping at the slightest thing to read into, to carbon date and read into the smallest thing about a culture that may not exist, and we devote PhD level efforts and funding to this effort, we're looking at that anthropological experience that we know will disappear. And that's the second motivator, is to share this because we know we have it and it's going to disappear for 500 years from now that we'll not know what it looks like. The third one, I'm a little pessimistic in the sense of, from an awareness standpoint, as science is projected in some ranges, such as the Alps, 40% of the ice would disappear if we went to carbon zero today. So there's a lag in the system. To me, it is improbable we will be able to turn it around fast enough to make a difference.
So how do you keep from being overwhelmed? I mean, that's a pretty dark prospect that you're actually seeing firsthand much faster than the rest of us are. But if you're looking out at what the scientific projections are, by the end of this century, a lot of the places that you're flying to might be totally dry.
Well, to me, it's elevating as I do it. So it's, to me, there is a sadness when I see the evidence of their recession. So the ones that are, if I didn't know a glacier was there, I just see pretty mountains. And I find that interesting, by the way. We just see beautiful mountains, and an average person might not know there was a glacier that's gone. So when we don't know that, we feel nothing. We say, okay, we take it for what it is. So there is a side of that I feel, both the sadness when I look at the clear evidence from the air that much of it may be gone, but then there's an awe when I'm immersed in the beauty of what is there. And that's really, it provides energy to me to keep doing it. And as far as it goes back to the aspect of the glaciers will still at least be around to some extent before I'm old. So I'd still have time. Like I go back to what I mentioned earlier, that I don't want to miss one season.
You know, last summer, more than 1,000 people died in the flooding that was in Pakistan, which put a huge proportion of that country underwater. And that was because of dramatic rainfall, which was also made worse by rapidly melting glaciers. I mean, what sort of lessons do you think we should be taking from events like what happened in Pakistan last year about the power of glacial melts and what they can do to existing populations?
I think we have no choice but to adapt. We can hope for policy change, but I think by the time there would be policy change that could get through to the economy and feed back into the climate cycle would be so long, we must adapt in the short term to deal with the changes that are happening at this pace.
So what's your hope for this project?
So the hope is to get all of them. That's the hope, absolutely all of them. The big question mark is the Himalayas. And so first of all, to get all of them, if I could conquer the Himalayas, we'll see that there's a lot of political and geographic and altitude considerations there, as well as expanse. Of course, I would like these images and videos to survive past me and actually be remembered and used. I'm thinking of PhDs who dig through old archives now of those who took similar images in the early 20th century, and they're digging through with great gusto. That guy probably was struggling to pay for the trip, wonder who cared about his images, and 100 years later, they're just digging through these jewels. I'm hoping it all stays together. It's digital format. So somebody long when I'm gone finds the same thing and can share it.
Garrett Fisher of the Global Glacier Initiative. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Catching it while he can for posterity. And finally tonight, a trip to the future. The annual Consumer Electronics Show is underway right now in Las Vegas, giving us an early look at some gee-whiz gadgets like this hands-free self-driving stroller. It only operates solo when a child is not inside, so parents can hold their babies or walk with their toddlers down the street without having to push. They'll be available later this year, but you'll have to wait until 2025 to get behind the wheel of BMW's latest concept vehicles. They allow drivers to pick from a range of 32 colors, a kind of mood car moment. Let's just hope they're electric vehicles. That's it for now. You can always catch us online on our podcast and across social media. Thank you for watching, and goodbye from London.
What they just got through talking about was major melting of icebergs and ice accumulation on mountain ranges on basically all 7 continents that this guy has been working on. I don't know why he's been doing it. Maybe he just had a passion to do it, whatever. But anyways, he is taking various pictures of how things used to be versus how things are today, and in correspondence in in trying to compare the pictures, in which just as of
the Russian Orthodox Church,
just as of within the past few days, California has been bombarded with so much rain, it has absolutely broke all-time records in regards towards the time period in which they have been bombarded by all these rains and all these deep, deep snows, that I know there's already deaths. There ain't no telling how many more is going to have to die before they realize that global warming is real, and that the sins of man has now caught up with mankind, and now we're seeing the great sorrows coming out of the Bible, just like it talks about. And until we're willing to properly readjust and go back to the altar and to go back to the drawing board in understanding what we're actually doing here, it's only going to tragically get worse, going from feast or famine, going from one extreme or the other, that I've been telling people about now for several recordings that I've been putting out. And it's really sad that a group of people.
But will it make any difference? You know, congressional correspondent Jessica Dean is on Capitol Hill.
I want you to listen to this,
here
please.
Here we are again, Jessica. It seems, 7 votes. We're now on the 8th vote, and still a stalemate. What are you hearing?
We expect that on this 8th vote, not much is going to change either. We talked to incoming GOP leader Kevin McCarthy on his way to the floor earlier today, and I said, "What's the plan?" And he just said, "Well, not much is going to change, but we think that the behind-the-scenes conversations are what's being more productive." So McCarthy and his allies think that and believe and keep saying that they are winning over one by one Kevin McCarthy's detractors, but the fact remains that the math just does not add up in his favor. He made some major concessions overnight to some of these hardliners. That deal is not done yet, but let's say he even got that group that he's targeting with these. It's still not enough to get him to that magical number of 218. He's still got some work to do. So it is a very heavy lift. And what his allies and supporters want to see is that he is making progress. And right now, he's not going backward, but he's certainly not making progress. So we're going to get through this 8th vote, and then the question becomes, what do they do next? Do they continue to vote? Do they adjourn for the evening? Do they adjourn for multiple days? Those are some of the questions that are floating around right now, because if they think they're making progress and can kind of pick off these detractors one by one, they may want to continue to do that off the floor and behind the scenes before they come back for a vote. So we're just going to wait until this 8th vote is over and see what the appetite is there. But Democrats, just so everyone knows, on the other side of the aisle, have been very upfront that they do not want to help bail out Republicans from this mess. They could be doing that. They're simply not, and we don't anticipate that they will at this point.
We'll keep our eyes peeled on Capitol Hill. Jessica Dean, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And that is a clear sign of a group of people that is dedicated in what they're doing. They are united in what they're doing. And it was the Republicans that basically throwed a monkey wrench into the pile, going back to the Reagan era and the Bush era, that has now put us where we are today, towards seeing this disarray happening with a group of people that obviously cannot get their act together. This makes the seventh time that they put it on the floor. And as I've said before, and I'll say again, we are in a very, very vulnerable state right now, because if something major was to happen, either on the other side of the world or with us here, who would be in charge towards making sure that everything got handled properly if they haven't even got things, if they hadn't got the loose ends tied? In other words, we're in a very vulnerable position right now to where we basically don't even have an active, ongoing government. Not from a legal perspective. And it's really sad because of what did happen going back into the late 80s that has put us where we are today. And it's really, really sad by seeing all the extreme weather patterns. Like I said a while ago, I mean, probably some of that rain, a great deal of that rain, is going to be beneficial to Lake Mead pertaining to the Colorado River because of it getting so low. But, you know, it's coming down in barrels. It's literally raining in areas that have never seen this type of rain before. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they got another one coming in behind this one, in which this makes up, I think, about the third one. They've got another one that's going to hit. And I don't know who's to say that there won't be another one. I mean, it is absolutely exhausting to our resources, regardless whether you're up in the mountains and you're being snowed in and you don't have proper food to stay alive, or you're down in the valley and your house is being suddenly washed away, or your business is being dismembered as far as not having services like you should, or all the electrical disturbances that's going on. It's absolutely mind-boggling to think that we have right now a Congress that can't even determine on who's going to hold the gavel in regards towards the broken Republican Republic. And as I've said before, and I'll say again, it couldn't have happened to a better group of people, because now all of this has caught up with them in exchange towards what they didn't do that they should have done. And a great deal of the churches was in behind all of this, going all the way back into the late 80s, early 90s, whenever the founder of the Windmill Ministries was pumping out all the material towards telling them about these end-time events that obviously people either didn't want to support or people didn't want to believe, one or the other, that has once more consequently put us where we are in behind the 8 ball. And if you can't see that we're in behind the 8 ball, obviously you're either blind, you can't see the trees for the forest, or you just don't care to begin with.
Thank you very much. It is, though, a slim minority of Republicans that are keeping the House from simply moving forward, as you heard Jessica saying that. Over the past 2 days, 20 Republicans, you're looking at them there, have been voting directly against Kevin McCarthy in his bid to become Speaker. They represent less than 10% of House Republicans, yet they've managed to completely grind Congress, as you've been seeing here, to a halt. The group includes some of the chamber's most hard-right lawmakers. At least half of the group have questioned the integrity of the 2020 election. Those are some of the names on your screen. So what are the reasons for not supporting McCarthy? Let's take a closer look at what some of them have said.
Probably's got something to do with Donald Trump, don't you think? But I don't know. I mean, I still reflected upon what happened back in the early 90s myself. I truly do. Because it's almost like a shadow of bad luck has fallen upon to the Republican Party suddenly, to where now the whole world can basically open up and see, transparency-wise, from the inside out towards what type of group of people that would be willing to do this to their own country, to their own people in the United States. Sad.
Matt Gaetz, it's personal. Have a listen.
Maybe the right person for the job of Speaker of the House isn't someone who has sold shares of themselves for more than a decade to get it.
While others like Lauren Moberg say McCarthy isn't making the concessions they want to see on issues across the board.
I will not withdraw. Our asks were not petty of Kevin McCarthy. They were not self-serving. We simply were asking for commitments on what the American people want to see. They want to see a vote on term limits, a vote on the Texas border plan to secure the southern border.
And some are holding their cards pretty close to their chest. But one thing's for sure, it is chaos wherever you look inside the halls of Congress.
Anarchy.
If you be number one, Dr. Malone, would you vote for
Anarchy.
Are you going to do Speaker's office? Where are you going?
They are.
Well, joining us now to help us make sense of what is happening is Larry Sabato. He's director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. Larry, great to have you on the show. So we're now heading into the 8th round, I believe. And it's hard to see, Larry, to be honest, how this round is going to be any different. How do you see this playing out?
I think you're absolutely right. I think this 8th vote is going to be very much like votes 1 through 7. The 20 that are opposing McCarthy are critical because he can only afford to lose 4 votes, and there are 20 of his own caucus members voting against him. Now, he could potentially bargain enough away. He's almost given away the store as it is, but he's got a few items left to bargain with. He might be able to bring some of them back, but it's hard to see how he brings enough back to get to 118. These people, many of them, just don't like him. You know, when you get past the issues and the complaints, you get down to a personality they don't like. They don't trust him. They point to the fact, which is correct, that he's switched positions on all kinds of things. He's been pro-Trump and anti-Trump and now pro-Trump again, and for this and for that, and now he's against this and against that. So he's
wishy-washy. You can't trust him. He says one thing, determining on the time scale of who he should be going with, and then something else will come up, and he'll change towards basically going just the very opposite. People can see this in him. They can see the irregularities. They can see the imbalances towards him not being consistent in his actions. And because of it, it's now costing him. It's costing him because they don't trust him, or they don't like him, or they just don't want something like that in their group that's going to cause division down the road. In other words, they're trying to stop something from materializing that could actually become very, very worse by having somebody in there that's wishy-washy. That's exactly what he is. He's wishy-washy.
They just don't trust him, and it's tough to regain trust under pressure.
Yeah, and it does appear that he is suffering defeat on this 8th vote as we're seeing the numbers tally out. But what do you make, Larry, I mean, of the discussions, of the concessions that McCarthy has, you know, provided them with? I mean, how much do you think this will even weaken his power if he even gets there? How can he get anything done?
Well, that's the question exactly. If he somehow wins after all of this, he is going to be the weakest speaker in modern times, maybe ever. He has almost no power left, and a single member, one member of his caucus, can call for a vote to oust him at any time. How would you like to operate under that kind of scenario? So he's given away the store. He desperately wants to be speaker. And sometimes when you want something too much, you don't get it. You would have gotten it under other circumstances, but you won't get it when you want it this badly.
In other words, he's showing desperate. He's revealing his desperacy. He's overbearing with how desperate that he is, and people can also see that. It's like, my God, what's wrong with this guy? Can't he figure out that that we don't want him in our little group? And of course, I guess he's probably playing on the same card that Donald Trump played on, because it was Donald Trump that basically done the exact same thing. Just absolutely refuses to accept reality in the form of reality. And you can't tell me that that is not a sense of not just immoral immaturity, but it's basically a sense from a psychological standpoint. Your psychiatric communities would tell you that that's one of the first signs of insanity, is to continue to keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. Expecting different results. So, you know, you have to ask yourself the question, do you really want somebody like this up there? That's this wishy-washy, back and forth, up and down. Today we're for it, tomorrow we're against it. Today we're for it, tomorrow we're against it. There's no stability there. And that's one of the things that has gotten America in the trouble that America's in right now, because they have lost their compass. They no longer was steering with the guidance or the influence of that northern star. And that's one reason why America's in the shape America's in right now, on every level you can even begin to imagine.
Yeah, the motion to vacate would actually make Theresa May's leadership look rather long, perhaps, if it did go ahead. I mean, where does this leave then the more moderate members, Larry, of the GOP? Will they be pushing them away from McCarthy, or will they want him to play hardball here?
They're at the point where some of them may very well defect because McCarthy's on the edge of giving away some major chairmanships to members of the Freedom Caucus, the most conservative members of the House, when some of McCarthy's own supporters thought they were getting those chairmanships. They negotiated for them. Well, if they have nothing to gain by voting for McCarthy, why would they bother?
Exactly.
So are you saying, Larry, you predicting
exactly.
that the person to blink first probably will be McCarthy? I mean, how long do you think this will go on?
Forever.
There are people
if the numbers don't change.
If they don't change, then they have to move on from McCarthy. He's not going to say that until he actually does it. But there's going to be no option. And names have been circulating for some time among the Republican members. They know they will go to Steve Scalise, who's also in the leadership, and possibly others. So they do have alternatives, but they would prefer that McCarthy decide himself that he needs to move on.
But if they pick Scalise, will those concessions will they be requiring the same concession? Will Scalise's hand also be weakened?
Many of them have said absolutely. They expect the same concessions from anybody who becomes Speaker. So McCarthy has not only given away his power, he's given away the power of anybody who replaces him. So it's going to be 2 years of what you've seen this last week. Chaos. Complete chaos. The Republican caucus is the chaos caucus.
This is what my grandfather used to always tell us towards being in between a hard place and a rock. That's what we're going to see for the next 2 years, towards total immaturity in regards towards a group of people actually working for the people in regards towards the benefit and the betterment of the people. And whenever you have something like this, you know, they keep talking about all the Democrat party or the Democrat policy that everybody runs off of is basically in jeopardy right now. This thing has been in jeopardy, if you go all the way back, for a long, long time. And it's just now sticking its ugly head out towards the consequences in this not working properly like it should. People now are paying more attention to this. And because they're paying more attention to it, we're now seeing it. But to me, it's a day late and a dollar short. They should have been paying attention towards what was happening going back into the late 80s, into the 90s, and not just letting people do whatever that they wanted to do, especially whenever it comes to 9/11 and what generated after 9/11 pertaining to Saddam Hussein. You can't continue to ignoring God and godly people and keep either attacking those people or allowing for those people to be attacked and think that you are not subject unto retribution. And to me, this is all part of that retribution, along with the droughts, along with the flooding, along with all the other irregularities with the gun violence and the suicides and all the above. Jails being full, over $31 trillion in debt. This is all part of that package. They keep saying, well, we're going to dig our way out. We're going to dig our way out. And what the American people in the world keep seeing, and I've used this as an illustration before, it's kind of like a mountain climber going up a very, very steep terrain, and every time he or she grabs a hold of a root or a limb or a rock, and they think that they got a good footing, and they're just about ready to gain that footing, all of a sudden something happens and they slide down about 10 or 15 foot. And they try it again and they slide down another 3 or 4 foot. And then they try it again and they slide down another 5 or 6 foot. Well, whenever you do this enough times, eventually, instead of you going to the top, you're going to go to the bottom. You're going to get to the bottom where you actually started, or maybe even beyond. My question is, once we get to the bottom, how ugly is the ugly actually going to be? How ugly is the ugly going to be? Because it's obvious that They're taking one step forward and two steps back, and they have been doing this now for quite some times. Even around the year 2000, I got to noticing how that our deficit was just going AWOL, just going out of hand. And besides what happened in the early 90s, besides what happened with the deal in Waco and the deal in Oklahoma, besides what happened between those three deals right there, you also got to look at what happened during the election that got stolen from the Democrats pertaining to the hanging chads. Everything beyond that point right there, including 9/11 and beyond, just turned into disarray. I mean, absolutely disarray. To where now we're no longer united. We talk about godly principles on TV. We talk about the things that's supposed to be under the same pretense of a righteous, holy, eternal God. But we don't see people's lifestyle changing. The proof is in the pudding towards not what we're saying that we're going to do, but what we're actually doing. And whenever it reaches the point that we're basically just a bunch of, reprobates, to the point that God turns his back completely on us towards blessing us, then we're going to see all these problems that's going to multiply times whatever again and again and again. And it's really heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, just like Nancy Pelosi said, of seeing how disrespectful that people have become to the institution, to the very fabric of that in which what was supposed to have put us together is now tearing us apart. And that's not what it's supposed to be. So you can't tell me that the devil isn't in the details here towards what's happening between our own people amongst our own society. And that's actually worse than a terrorist enemy from afar off, because you can expect your adversary, your enemy, to want to do bodily harm to you or hurt you or bring some sort of disarray to you in some sort of way, or I do. Now, since they have showed their ugly face around in this area, I expect somebody to get ill. I expect somebody to rev up their motor or get ugly with me or cuss me or bring up all kinds of accusations about me. I expect those things. Why? Because they're my enemy.
To back McCarthy hasn't really
they're my enemy.
At all.
But what makes it dangerous is that whenever you get with a group of people that's supposed to be working on the same side and you realize that the enemy is from within, then it becomes sure enough dangerous. It's sure enough bad then.
He'll do whatever he has to do to accomplish that. And you couldn't be more right. One of the reasons why Democrats did so well and Republicans did so poorly compared to expectations was that the Republican nominees went to the extreme. They went so far right that many Americans got a little frightened and they ended up voting Democratic.
Yeah, look, I love speaking to you, Larry. And, for us political junkies, this is a bit like the World Cup. But this is just not tenable. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds if they go for the 9th round, of course. But it does appear like McCarthy appears to have suffered defeat on the 8th speaker ballot. Great to have you on the show, Larry Sabato. Always appreciated. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Isa.
And still to come tonight.
So sad. So sad.
Castor of Florida. Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez DeRemer. McCarthy. Sherfilis McCormick.
They're going at this the 9th time.
Jeffries. Chu. Jeffries. Cicilline. Jeffries. Siscomani.
This is mind-blowing to me. This is absolutely mind-blowing to me that they would be willing to get in there and do this knowing that they've got a problem from within. That's the very thing that I've been telling you about, is that these people have lost their unity. They have lost faith in themselves. They have lost faith in, obviously, the things that the whole body is supposed to stand for. And of course, whenever you have it divided like this, what does the Bible say? That a divided house will not stand. United we stand, divided we fall. And just like the commentator just got through saying a while ago on CNN, that people have become frightened of this type of irregularity and this type of imbalances that's occurring with the Republican Party. And to be quite frank with you, I don't blame people for being frightened, because it's almost like they have lost their footing. And to me, they have lost their footing, using that example that I was trying to use a while ago towards a mountain climber going up a hill, and all of a sudden they go down, and then they go down again, then they go down again, then they go down again. It's like, wow, they're not going to be able to accomplish this. So obviously something has torn them apart. Something has, from within, ripped them apart. I still go back to what happened in the late 80s, early 90s. And then, of course, if you look at what occurred with the hanging chads, pertaining to how that the Republicans basically stole the Democratic Party, you have seen now disarray increase more and more and more. And, of course, the January 6th deal was kind of like, I don't know, kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back in regards towards actually looking at how disarray that things really are. And who knows where we'll lead or what this will go to in the next few years, or even in the next few months, or the next few weeks, or the next few days. Who knows? It's become so concerning that whenever I go to bed at night and I pray, Lord, keep me until I arise, take care of me as I sleep. And I pray for my family, and I pray for my son, and I pray for different people that I know, and I pray for my country. And most of all, I pray that God's will be done, regardless of what may happen. It doesn't matter if we do get torn completely apart. I'm still praying that God's will be done. And you know it cannot be God's will for a country to be torn apart that at one time used to be a godly country. It cannot be God's will. So what we're seeing here is the works of the devil, just like it talks about in the Bible. In the last days, Satan will come down in great wrath because he knoweth his time is short. I mean, I couldn't believe some of the statistics that these people was talking about just earlier in regarding to all of these other different voting ballots, pertaining to how bad that the country really is, pertaining to the suicides, pertaining to the drug overdoses, pertaining to medical procedures being low right now, pertaining to medications, tubes, other types of things. I couldn't believe that how disarrayed that our border has become. I mean, it's almost to the point of it being unbelievable, but you have to believe the very facts that you're seeing in front of your very eyes. Proof is in the pudding towards how disarrayed that this country has become for the past 31 years. And now I think it's finally catching up with them. You know, you can kick the can down the road and hoping that the next administration or the next generation that they'll figure out some sort of a way to correct the imbalances towards the fuzzy math that they've been playing for the past 30 plus years. But eventually somebody's going to have to give an account. Eventually, you're going to have to quit kicking the can down the road towards just gathering the low-lying fruit. Eventually, you're going to have to ante up. And this is what they've been trying to prevent now for quite some time. I guess since 2000, they've been trying to prevent from anteing up. And all it's been doing is compiling the problems and exacerbating them that much worse every administration or every year. It's only gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And the American people can see this. And it's become haunting. It's become frightening to them. A matter of fact, this went beyond just frightening. It's actually went to the point of being I don't even know that I got a proper word of saying. It goes beyond alarming or frightening. It's terrorizing. It's terrorizing. It's demoralizing and terrorizing to see where a country at one time used to have its act together. And there's always been different administrations that has problems catching, like this one doing wrong or that one doing wrong or this happening or that happening. But nothing on the level of what we have seen in the past 3 or 4 years since the Donald Trump deal. No, 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 no. This has only tragically gotten worse. And if you'll compile that with 9/11, and if you'll compile that with all the other bad stuff that's happened to America, it's like, wow, we've been sure enough jinxed, haven't we? I mean, we've been jinxed. What's going on within our system? Our State of the Union has broken. You can no longer pretend that these things are not occurring towards trying to deceive the American people whenever they can see it, they can understand it, they can interpret it in the proper form. And like I said a while ago, it's reached a point of being absolutely terrorizing. Terrorizing and not knowing from the time you go to bed, from the time you wake up, towards what the hell are you going to have to now experience or watch or listen to that other people are going through that has caused so much damage, so much irreversible damage to the American people. And basically, I've been saying all along that we've been under attack. We're under this spiritual warfare pertaining to Satan coming down in great wrath. And trust me, he could care less about how many people got affected or how bad it actually got. There comes a time that the American people, this American government, has to rectify for the things that it has done in the past and trying to make amends in the people that it has offended and the things that it has done. Honesty is the best policy. And if you don't play by the book, you suffer great circumstances and consequences on account of it. They're saying right now that COVID is unleashed again. That's causing all kinds of havoc. In addition to the problems that's happening to the children that's dying, in addition to the gun violence, in addition to the suicides. So what is going on? One may be asking. We are under a spiritual invasion. Just like the Bible talks about, that in the last days, Satan will come down in great wrath. And what we're seeing is the wolf in the chicken coop, and now the hens are being massacred right in front of us because we have allowed for the big bad wolf that we knew that was out there, but now he's gotten in the gate and now he's in the chicken coop. Who let the wolf in? Who let the big bad wolf in? Who let the boogeyman do this? That's what we're not doing. We're not going back to the core of origin and trying to understand what has happened, why it happened, when it happened, where it happened, how it happened, etc., etc., etc. And until we're willing to do this on the level that I'm talking about, I don't care how much education you got. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what state that you're in. I don't care how old you are, how young you are. This is going to affect each and every person coming near a neighborhood near you, just like the Walmart slogan. Coming near a neighborhood near you. If it hadn't already. In a lot of cases, it's already knocked people off their feet. It's unbelievable how idiotic that people can become. And like I said a while ago, towards one of the characteristics of somebody that's insane is to keep continually doing the same thing again and again and again, and hoping that they're going to have different results. Well, how are you going to have different results if you're still doing it the same way? again and again and again. Lessons will be repeated until learned. Now, how many times does people have to say that? Lessons will be repeated until learned. For the Bible talks and says that I've not found thy works perfect yet. To go back, go back, go back. Do the first works over again. For I've not found thy works perfect yet. To go back to the altar. To go back to the drawing board. To go back. To figure out a game plan. To go back. I don't see people going back. I don't see a revival. I don't see a spiritual awakening in America. What I see is condemnation. And this is one of the open illustrations of it. And it's so, so sad. It breaks my heart to see where a group of people was so idiotic in thinking the same thing that basically the Pharaohs, the Egyptians, thought pertaining to the great liberator Moses, that thought that he or they was going to be able to conquer Moses and God, and Moses is God. And they're towards the last. And it took the very, very last that King Pharaoh finally acknowledged that Moses' God was the real God. But look at all the suffering and the pain and the death and destruction that it had to come before he was willing to give in and finally make that announcement to his own people and to Moses' people. Good luck to all of us. I mean, we're starting out kind of in a very, very freakish, dangerous, dark way in the year 2022. I mean, we're really getting started on the wrong foot again. And I was hoping just the opposite. I was hoping that we was going to be able to work out our differences and try to make amends. But, good luck in that. They're at the 9th time of trying to get this worked out. Will it be worked out on the 9th time any quicker or easier than it was on the 2nd or the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th or the 6th or the 7th and even the 8th? It's almost like they've all been bewitched and they're running, but they don't know what they're running from or they don't know what they're running to. But they're running. They're moving. And I've used this illustration before. It's just like a dog chasing after his tail. He's moving. He's getting exercise. But the odds of him catching that tail is going to be slim to none. And until we figure out the same thing, that we're basically only chasing our own tails, we're only going to continue like the dog that continues to keep chasing after its tail. Or the way the Bible talks about, towards the dog returning back to its vomit again and again and again. And somehow, some way, something is going to have to break this. And if it takes the whole shebang to basically collapse onto itself to the point that it creates all this endless pain and suffering to the American people, shame, shame, shame on all these people that has allowed for this to occur. Good luck to all of us. I want to say God bless you. God bless your prayers. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless those that are trying to do the righteous, holy, correct thing in not only politics, but also in church. And just want to say, God bless the planet. It's just becoming more and more obvious of it in the wrong direction. Just want to say, I pray for these people, and I pray that God will move upon these people towards delivering these people out of, obviously, the bondages that they're under. Shalom.